What if the person you become is built the same way you build your creations? Piece by piece, choice by choice, scar by scar. That is the deeper story of Franky in One Piece. Because Franky isn't just a shipwright or a cyborg. He's living proof that identity is not something you're given, it's something you construct. And when that construction is guided by purpose, even pain can become power. Franky's journey begins long before he ever joins the Straw Hat crew. As a child, he is known as Cutty Flam, an orphan taken in by the legendary shipwright, Tom. Under Tom's guidance, Franky is introduced to the art of building, not just ships, but ideas. Creation becomes his language, his passion, his identity. But more importantly, Tom teaches him a philosophy that becomes the foundation of his life. There is no such thing as a ship that deserves to be blamed. In other words, what you create is not inherently good or bad. It's how it's used that defines it. This lesson is powerful, but it also sets the stage for one of the most defining traumas in Franky's life. When the ships he builds are used for destruction, when they become tools of chaos, Franky internalizes the blame. He doesn't separate the creation from the consequence. He sees himself as responsible. And when Tom is taken away, when everything he built with pride becomes associated with guilt, Franky's identity begins to fracture. This is where we see a critical psychological shift. Franky doesn't stop building, but the reason he builds changes. It's no longer just about passion. It becomes about redemption. About proving that what he creates can protect instead of destroy. But at the same time, he begins to hide. Not physically at first, but emotionally. He adopts a new persona, a louder, more exaggerated version of himself. The eccentric, over-the-top, super personality that most people recognize. But here's the deeper truth. That persona is not just confidence, it's protection. Because when someone experiences guilt and loss at that level, they often create an identity that prevents them from feeling that pain again. Franky's loudness, his humor, his exaggerated behavior, it's a shield, a way to stay in control of how others perceive him, a way to avoid being seen as the broken child who lost everything. And then comes one of the most literal and symbolic transformations in anime, Franky rebuilding his own body. After a near-fatal accident, he turns himself into a cyborg. On the surface, this is innovation, it's genius, it's survival, but psychologically, it's something deeper. It's self-reconstruction. Franky doesn't just modify his body, he redefines himself. He takes control of his own narrative. If the world can break him, then he will rebuild himself stronger, better, different. And this is where the theme of identity becomes powerful, because Franky shows that who you are is not fixed. It can be redesigned. But there's a cost. When you rebuild yourself after trauma, there's always a question. Are you expressing your true self or protecting it? And for a long time, Franky exists in that space. He is confident, bold, unapologetic, but also guarded. Because beneath all of it, there is still unresolved pain. Still a part of him that feels responsible. Still a part of him that hasn't fully forgiven himself. This is why his eventual connection with Monkey D. Luffy and the Straw Hat crew is so important. Luffy doesn't see Franky as broken. He doesn't see him as someone who needs to prove anything. He sees him as he is, and accepts him completely. And that acceptance begins to dismantle the walls Franky built around himself. Because true growth doesn't just come from changing yourself. It comes from being seen without needing to change. Franky's decision to join the crew is not just about adventure, it's about purpose. For the first time since his past, he is building again with clarity. Not out of guilt, not out of fear, but out of vision. The creation of the Thousand Sunny becomes a defining moment, a symbol that he has finally aligned his identity with his purpose. And that alignment changes everything. Because when your purpose is clear, your personality stabilizes. You no longer need to hide behind exaggerated versions of yourself. You no longer need to prove your worth through constant performance. You simply act in alignment with what you believe in. Franky still shouts. He still poses. He still says super. But now, it's not a shield. It's expression. It's authentic. It's chosen. And that's the difference between a persona and a personality. One is created to protect you. The other is revealed when you no longer need protection. There's also something incredibly important about Franky's innovation. He doesn't just build for himself, he builds for others. His creations are designed to protect, to empower, to support. And that shift from self-focused survival to other-focused contribution is a key part of identity development. Because purpose expands when it moves beyond you. Franky teaches a powerful lesson. Your past does not define your future, but it can shape it. The pain you experience, the mistakes you make, the things you regret, they don't have to limit you. They can become the raw material you use to build something greater. But only if you're willing to face them. Because innovation is not just about creating new things, it's about creating a new version of yourself. And that process requires honesty. It requires reflection. It requires the courage to look at who you were and decide who you want to become. Franky didn't erase his past, he integrated it. He took the lessons, the pain, the responsibility, and turned them into purpose. And in doing so, he became more than just a shipwright. He became a creator with intention. A person whose identity is no longer shaped by guilt, but by meaning. At the end of the day, Franky's story is not just about machines, ships, or strength. It's about construction, the construction of self. That you can rebuild, redesign, and redefine who you are at any moment. Because just like anything you create, you are allowed to evolve. And when your identity is built on purpose, everything you become becomes super.